I'm Clara Jensen, and by 30, I was earning six figures, climbing fast in the world of finance, and quietly rescuing my family from one emergency after another. I thought I was being a good daughter, loyal, dependable, generous. But everything changed one Thanksgiving morning when I overheard them laughing about me from the back patio. I wasn't their daughter, I was their ATM. That afternoon, I didn't bring just a turkey. I brought the red folder, 7 years of receipts, secrets, and the truth that finally set me free. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from. And hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt taken for granted by the people closest to you. This story might be exactly what your heart's been needing. Growing up in our charming old bungalow nestled in Seattle's Maple Leaf neighborhood, I never imagined the day would come when my own family would look at me and see nothing but a walking ATM. My name's Clara Jensen, 30 years old now, but back then, life felt stable, almost idyllic. Dad was a gifted architect with a quiet smile, and Mom, Eleanor, taught second grade with a warmth that could melt even the most stubborn child. My sister Brenda, younger by 3 years, inherited Mom's charm and seemed to glide through life on compliments and attention. Marcus, the youngest by 5, was the classic baby of the family, coddled, lazy, and always somehow excused. We were your average middle-class household, comfortable, content, until we weren't. Everything came crashing down when I was 16. Dad, our steady center, passed away suddenly after a short illness. His death left more than a hole in our hearts. It left behind a mountain of debts and reckless financial choices we hadn't known existed. And just like that, the warm, nurturing mother I adored turned into someone I barely recognized, tight-lipped, bitter, and preoccupied. "We have to stick together now," she'd murmur, gripping my hand like a lifeline. At the time, I thought it was love. Looking back, it was a warning. That phrase would echo through the years, less a promise and more a life sentence. 2 years later, Mom married Robert Davis, a man so unremarkable he practically faded into the wallpaper. He was quiet, agreeable, and rarely offered more than a nod. When I asked her why she married someone so absent, she waved it off. "Robert brings stability," she said flatly. "You'll get it when you're older, Clara." As if love was some naive indulgence I couldn't afford to care about. In reality, he was a placeholder, a financial cushion. More convenient than comforting. She didn't want partnership. She wanted peace of mind. While Brenda floundered and Marcus drifted through half-hearted ambitions, I coped the only way I knew how, through drive and discipline. I poured myself into schoolwork, joined every academic club, and clawed my way to a full scholarship at the University of Washington. I still remember my graduation. They sat in the audience, clapping dutifully as I gave my valedictorian speech. "You've always been the smart one," Mom said afterward, sipping cheap champagne. But her tone wasn't maternal. It was speculative, like a stockbroker eyeing a promising investment. College was a haze of 18-hour days, lectures, shifts at the campus bookstore, unpaid internships. My dorm room was barely bigger than a closet, but I made it work. Brenda, meanwhile, whimsically chose a private liberal arts school. Mom and Robert co-signed loans like they were writing grocery lists. Marcus? He barely finished high school and started talking about launching something in tech. Whatever that meant. Still, I kept my head down. By junior year, I secured a coveted internship at a prestigious financial firm. That internship became a job offer. At 22, I was earning $75,000 a year, more than I'd ever dared to imagine. It didn't take long for the first call to come. 3 weeks into my new job, Mom phoned, her voice taut and deliberate. "Brenda's car just gave out," she sighed, pausing dramatically. "The mechanic wants $2,800, and with her tuition this month, well, you understand." I transferred the money that night. Brenda's response? A cheerful, "Thanks, sis," lifesaver. And then silence. No follow-up, no thank you card. Just radio silence until the next crisis. The floodgates opened after that. 2 months later, Marcus suddenly needed $1,500 for a coding boot camp that would totally change his life. Mom mentioned property taxes were overdue. Robert's hours got cut. Every ask came with solemn promises of payback that never saw the light of day. Soon, family dinners became thinly veiled budget meetings. Calls from home only rang when a favor was brewing. My promotions and raises were met with congratulatory smiles, followed by gentle probes about what a successful woman like you might be able to spare this time. The first real blow came when I turned 24. I had just received a promotion at work, along with a generous raise, when Mom called, her voice ragged and drenched in panic. "They're threatening foreclosure, Clara. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. Robert's company is letting people go, and with Brenda's grad school bills piling up." Her voice cracked into sobs. I didn't hesitate. I drained my savings account, $22,000 I'd been slowly collecting for a down payment on my first home, and wired it straight to her. I drove up that weekend, still shaken, expecting to find a family on the brink. Instead, I walked into a freshly decorated living room, complete with a brand new sectional couch and a gleaming entertainment system. Mom caught my stunned expression. "Oh, these? Absolute steals. Once-in-a-lifetime clearance deals. And honestly, after all the emotional trauma of nearly losing the house, we deserve something to brighten the mood." Her smile was casual, almost proud. That night, I overheard Brenda on the phone, giggling with a friend about their upcoming spring break in Hawaii. "Yeah, Mom and Robert came through big time," she laughed. "Said I earned a break with all the grad school stress. They totally covered it." That was the moment the roles were cemented. I was no longer a daughter. I was the safety net, the emergency fund, the fallback plan. My success wasn't something to be proud of. It was a resource to be harvested. Meanwhile, Brenda and Marcus became the delicate dreamers, the ones who deserved comfort and indulgence simply by virtue of existing. Every time I paused, every time I so much as questioned another request, Mom would sigh with that theatrical air of sacrifice. "Blood is thicker than water, Clara. We're all we've got in this world." By the time I turned 25, it dawned on me that I hadn't taken a single vacation in over 3 years. Not because I didn't want to, but because every extra cent I made was absorbed by someone else's so-called emergency. I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment, patching up their messes while Brenda continued her fully funded graduate journey, and Marcus threw money at his latest startup, a social media platform that never saw a single line of code. I watched them chase dreams on my dime, while I told myself over and over again that this was what family did. Family came first, didn't it? As my career climbed, so did the cost of staying in my family's good graces. By the time I turned 26, I had been promoted to senior financial analyst, earning $98,000 a year. On paper, I was thriving. In reality, I had less disposable income than I did as a fresh college graduate. What used to be the occasional cry for help had quietly morphed into routine expectations, monthly, seasonal, emotionally timed. That fall, Mom called again, her voice tight, rehearsed. "I've gotten myself into a bit of a mess with the credit cards," she sighed. "Didn't want to burden you, but it's gotten out of hand. I already had my banking app open." "How much?" I asked. Her voice dropped to a whisper, like she was confessing to a priest. 15,000. The interest is eating me alive. I haven't slept in weeks, Clara." I sent the transfer that evening, along with a custom-made spreadsheet designed to help her manage her budget. She thanked me like a grateful client, promising she'd be more mindful from now on. 2 months later, her Facebook page lit up with glossy photos of a sparkling new kitchen renovation. When I asked about it over Sunday dinner, Robert mumbled something about essential repairs. While Mom suddenly found the roast potatoes fascinating, Marcus wasn't far behind. At 27, after years of false starts, he declared he'd found his true passion, a subscription box for craft beer enthusiasts. He needed $20,000 to launch. Website, inventory, branding, the works. "This is different," he said earnestly, using my childhood nickname for the first time in forever. "I've done the research. These things are huge right now." When I asked for a business plan, he handed me a few crumpled pages, half-baked ideas scribbled beside doodles and buzzwords. Against every instinct, I withdrew from my 401k and wrote the check. "It's a loan," I said sternly, "with interest. I expect payments in 6 months." Marcus beamed. "All promises and gratitude." "You're the best, Ames. I swear I won't let you down this time." 6 months passed, then 8, nothing. When I asked, he rolled his eyes. God, Clara, you're unbelievable. Not everything's about spreadsheets. I'm building something real here. The business quietly disappeared after that. No apology. No repayment. The $20,000 evaporated like a poorly poured stout. And just when I thought I might catch my breath, Brenda's wedding landed like a luxury-sized invoice. She'd fallen for Eric, a pharmaceutical sales rep she met during grad school. 6 months in, they were engaged. Mom invited me to lunch, smiling with that mix of pride and panic I'd come to recognize. Everything's coming together so beautifully, she began. The venue's locked in, the caterer, the band. The dress is being flown in from Paris. I blinked. Eric's parents can only do so much. And with our financial situation, how much, I asked, already bracing. She slid a printed spreadsheet across the table like a manager pitching a major investment. Total, $35,000. I know it's a lot, she said quickly, watching my face. But this is Brenda's moment. She's always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding. You know how hard she's worked. I stared at the line items, $10,000 for flowers, $6,000 for invitations. A live band, custom linens, imported champagne. Brenda wanted royalty. I was expected to foot the crown. What about my special days, Mom? I asked softly, almost afraid to hear the answer. What about my dreams? For a split second, something cold flickered across her face before she slipped into a tone that had comfort carefully baked in. Oh, sweetheart, you've always been the strong one. So independent, so focused on your career. Brenda, she needs this. You know how much appearances matter to her. I nodded slowly, signed the check, and told myself it was just one more time. At the wedding, I was seated at a distant table with relatives I barely knew, while Mom, Robert, and Marcus were positioned front and center beside the bride and groom. When Brenda gave her speech, she beamed at our mother and new in-laws, thanking them for making her dream day a reality. My name wasn't mentioned, not a nod, not a glance. I smiled politely through the evening, though inside, something hollow cracked a little wider. That night, I opened a red cardboard folder and started what would become a ritual. Inside, I documented every dollar, every loan, every gift, every desperate transfer that had passed from my hands to theirs. I listed dates, amounts, the so-called purpose, and whatever promises had been made. When I added up the total, $127,000 in just 4 years, I had to sit down. I felt nauseous. That didn't even include birthday money, grocery runs, or paying the electric bill more times than I could count. By the time I turned 29, the mortgage had quietly become my responsibility too. Robert had been laid off again, though by then I suspected he just preferred daytime TV to job interviews. Mom had cut her teaching hours, claiming stress and exhaustion. Marcus moved back home after his business flopped, bringing nothing but dirty laundry and vague plans for a podcast. Meanwhile, Brenda and Eric bought a 5-bedroom colonial in an upscale neighborhood, somehow enjoying weekend spa trips and catered brunches, despite salaries that didn't quite add up. In April, I finally tried to set some limits. During dinner, I said as calmly as I could, I've reached a point where I need to focus on my own financial well-being. I'm willing to help during true emergencies, but I can't keep carrying the entire family. The silence that followed was sharp and immediate. Then Mom's voice rose, trembling but theatrical. After everything we've done for you, I raised you alone after your father abandoned us. I gave up everything so you could have a future. We're family, Marcus muttered, eyes locked on his plate. You don't just walk away from family. Brenda barely looked up from her wine glass. It's not like you have anything else to spend money on, she said with a shrug. No husband, no kids, not even a dog. The words stung more than I let on. That night, I went home with a splitting migraine and transferred another $3,000, this time for overdue property taxes they'd somehow forgotten about. I added the slip to the red folder. It barely fit. 3 months later, I was promoted again, senior investment advisor, with a base salary of $135,000, plus annual bonuses. I didn't tell anyone. Not a word. I'd learned better, but somehow they found out. Like clockwork, the requests began arriving more frequently, and with larger price tags. I kept tracking everything in the red folder. The down payment I'd earmarked for a modest condo downtown. Gone. Used to clear Marcus's ballooning credit card debt. The European vacation I'd been dreaming about since college. Cancelled so Mom and Robert could replace their leaking roof. And the professional development courses I was excited to take. Pushed aside again. Brenda had medical bills from her cosmetic surgery, and she needed just a little help getting back on her feet. 7 years. 7 years of putting everyone else's needs above my own. On paper, I looked like a success story. A 6-figure salary, upward career momentum. But in reality, I had nothing to show for it. No home, barely their savings, a retirement account pillaged more than once. But it wasn't just the money, it was the slow, aching awareness that I had become a utility, a service. Not a daughter or sister, but a reliable source of rescue. The people I kept showing up for saw my generosity not as love, but as obligation, expected, endless, and unquestioned. The red folder became more than just a ledger. It was my private archive of sacrifices unacknowledged and debts unreturned. Page after page told a story that no one else in my family cared to hear. It was my silent proof that something had gone terribly wrong. And as I flipped through those records late at night, tallying what I had lost, emotionally and financially, one thing became unmistakably clear. This couldn't go on. Something had to change. And for the first time in years, I started to believe that maybe that change had to start with me. The moment everything changed didn't arrive with fireworks or fury. It came quietly, on an ordinary Sunday in August, 3 months before Thanksgiving. I'd shown up early for our usual family dinner, as I often did, using the emergency key Mom had given me years ago, originally meant for real emergencies, but more often used to drop off checks or groceries. The house was still, the kind of stillness that made you feel like an outsider. I set the wine I'd brought down on the kitchen counter and heard laughter floating in from the back patio. I moved toward the French doors, meaning to join them, but paused when I heard my name. Clara's bonus should hit next month, Mom said casually, as though she were talking about a shared bank account. I was thinking maybe it's time we finally get that vacation place up in Lake Chelan. Brenda laughed, her voice light and sharp. She's such an easy mark. Just say the words, family emergency, and boom, checkbook out. Remember when she made me sign a payment plan for that business loan? Like that was ever real? Marcus chuckled. Please, like I was going to pay that back. What planet does she live on? She's lonely, Mom replied, her tone flat and analytical. No friends, no partner. We're all she's got. She'll keep giving because she doesn't have anywhere else to put her energy. It's almost sad, Brenda added. All that money and she still dresses like it's laundry day. Lives in that gloomy little apartment like some ghost. To Clara, Robert said, lifting his glass, his voice a lazy toast. The gift that keeps on giving. Their laughter drifted through the open air, easy, unbothered, merciless. I stood frozen at the doorway, hands still resting on the frame, my heart thudding in slow disbelief. I'd suspected it before, quietly, in passing, but now I knew. And knowing wasn't like wondering. It didn't ache. It broke. I turned and walked out the front door without saying a word, slipped into my car, and sat there, numb and shaking. 10 minutes later, I sent Mom a text. I had a migraine and wouldn't make it to dinner. She replied with concern, then promptly reminded me Robert still needed dental work they couldn't afford. I didn't sleep that night. Their voices echoed in my mind, repeating like a looped recording. By morning, my sadness had cooled into something sharper, resolve. I called in sick to work and spent the day reading about financial abuse and family estrangement. The articles felt like pieces of my own story, each one echoing the same warning signs I'd ignored for years. The creeping dependency, the guilt tactics, the manipulation masked as love. By week's end, I had 2 appointments booked, one with Dr. Evelyn Reed, a trauma therapist, and one with Clara Chen, a financial recovery attorney. Dr. Reed listened with gentle stillness. When I finally stopped talking, she nodded softly and said, "What you're describing is financial exploitation, Clara. It's a form of abuse. The fact that it's your family doesn't make it less real. It just makes it harder to recognize." Clara Chen was more direct. She flipped through the documents in my red folder with clinical precision. "You've been functioning as an unlicensed bank," she said. "These weren't gifts. They were loans secured through emotional pressure and false assurances. "Can I recover anything?" I asked, not really expecting the answer I wanted. "Some," she said. "You have detailed records. The business loan to your brother, the so-called wedding contribution, the mortgage support. Those are all candidates for recovery." I hesitated. "What about everything else? The emotional toll?" Her expression softened. "That's harder to recover in court, but it's the most important one to repair in your life. Setting boundaries now doesn't just protect your finances. It protects your peace." With their guidance, I began rebuilding, not just my savings, but my sense of self. First came the private investigator. I wanted clarity. I needed to know the full truth. What he found hit harder than I expected. Mom had been gambling, regular visits to the Snoqualmie casino, where she lost thousands. The medical emergency Brenda had once pleaded for? It funded a 3-day casino binge. And the roof repair I'd paid for never happened. The money went straight into slot machines. Marcus had never intended to build a business. The $20,000 I invested, he used it to purchase a nearly new BMW. Sleek, black, and entirely unnecessary. He kept it parked at a friend's house to avoid my noticing, like a child hiding candy under the bed. I later learned he hadn't even registered the beer subscription venture with the state. It had all been a ruse, but nothing stung quite like what I uncovered about Brenda. The medical bills I'd helped her cover, elective cosmetic surgery, and the financial emergency that supposedly threatened their home? A fiction. She and Eric had quietly purchased a vacation property on Orcas Island the same month they pleaded for mortgage help. The down payment matched my loan to the dollar. With guidance from my attorney, I spent October and November preparing for what I knew had to come. I gathered every receipt, every transfer, every manipulated plea and broken promise. The red folder became a case file, painstakingly detailed. Bank records, text messages, photos from the private investigator showing the BMW, the island property, the casino visits, legal documents establishing my standing. It was no longer just documentation, it was evidence, and I made the hardest decision of all. I would confront them, all of them, together, on Thanksgiving Day, not to cause a scene, but because it was the only day I knew they'd all be there. No excuses, no avoidance. As Thanksgiving neared, the script played out with grim familiarity. Mom called, hinting at holiday expenses being tighter than usual. Marcus dropped vague remarks about a new business idea and how he could use just a little support to get it off the ground. Brenda sighed about the costs of hosting dinner, lacing her comments with passive frustration. I offered polite empathy and nothing else. No checks, no transfers, no rescues. Their responses shifted quickly, first confusion, then sharpness, then a frosty silence when they realized the well wasn't refilling. 3 days before Thanksgiving, Brenda called abruptly. "We've decided it's better to do Thanksgiving at Mom's," she said flatly. "You can bring the turkey and wine." I agreed without hesitation. What she didn't know was that the turkey had already been ordered, the wine carefully selected. I had also prepared one final gift for each of them, beautifully wrapped with handwritten letters inside. Not cruel letters, but honest ones. Clear, thoughtful, final. And nestled in my bag was the red folder, ready to be opened when the moment came. The night before Thanksgiving, I barely slept. My chest ached under the weight of what was coming. I was about to face the only family I had and tell them in no uncertain terms that the game was over, that I knew everything, that I was done. The fear of losing them pulsed just beneath my skin, but deeper still was something stronger. Resolve, steady, unyielding. 7 years of giving, sacrificing, and being used had brought me to this point. And tomorrow, no matter how it played out, the cycle would end. I would not carry it forward another day. Thanksgiving morning arrived crisp and clear, the sun casting long shadows over a blanket of fresh snow. I chose my outfit deliberately, a deep crimson sweater paired with charcoal slacks. Festive, but composed. I wanted to look like someone in control of their life. One bag held the carefully wrapped gifts I had prepared for each family member. Another carried the turkey and 2 bottles of fine wine. And slung over my shoulder was my leather messenger bag, the red folder inside, a quiet arsenal of truth, documentation, and 7 years' worth of betrayal. I pulled into the driveway at exactly 10 a.m. It was already full, Brenda's spotless white Range Rover, Marcus's reliable old Honda, and Robert's dull gray sedan. The BMW, of course, was hidden elsewhere, still tucked away in secrecy. From inside, I heard soft jazz renditions of holiday songs, and the scent of cinnamon mingled with strong coffee. It could have been any other year, warm, familiar, but this time I walked in knowing everything. "She's here," Mom called from somewhere inside. Her arms were around me before I could set anything down, her perfume as strong as ever, her hug the kind of polished affection she reserved for company. "Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart." The house was immaculate and almost extravagantly decorated. A towering Christmas tree already stood in the corner, dripping in ornate glass ornaments. Elegant garlands curled up the banister, and poinsettias in crystal vases lined the entryway. I had no doubt where the funding had come from. The private investigator's report had included a receipt. $3,200 spent at upscale holiday boutiques just 2 weeks after I'd helped with the property taxes. Still, I meant it when I said, "Everything looks beautiful." Whatever else she was, my mother had taste. Marcus appeared, smiling too easily. "Let me take those bags," he offered, reaching for the wine and turkey. He'd barely spoken to me in weeks, ever since I refused to bankroll his latest entrepreneurial brainstorm. Today, though, he played the dutiful son. Performative helpfulness wrapped in holiday cheer. Brenda drifted in from the kitchen, a hostess in her element. Her eyes swept over me, calculating as ever. "Happy Thanksgiving," she said, brushing her cheek against mine. "That sweater's lovely. Is it new?" "I've had it for years," I said. Watching the flicker of distaste cross her face, she didn't bother hiding her disappointment, still convinced my wardrobe choices reflected a tragic lack of ambition. Robert raised his Bloody Mary in greeting from the living room. "Good to see you, Clara," he said, with a slow, tired nod. His glass was already half empty, possibly his second of the morning. Despite the glittering decor and the carefully curated ambiance, tension hummed just beneath the surface. Conversation stalled whenever I walked into the room. I caught Brenda and Mom exchanging glances, their expressions too careful, too composed. Marcus checked his phone obsessively, thumbing replies to someone with unusual urgency. It didn't take much to see they were wary. They sensed something, perhaps. They just didn't know what. But they would. We gathered around the table for our traditional Thanksgiving breakfast. Mom's famous cinnamon rolls, crisp bacon, fruit salad, and mimosas. The atmosphere was light. Artificially so, as we chatted about traffic, local news, and a celebrity's recent scandal. No one asked about my job. No one asked about my life. And most notably, no one brought up the money I hadn't sent. The ignored request that had gone unanswered for weeks. "These rolls are incredible, Mom," I offered, breaking a lull in the conversation. "Your best yet," she beamed, tilting her head modestly. "I used real Madagascar vanilla this year, worth every penny. It makes all the difference." I nodded politely, my expression neutral. The PI's report had noted a $75 charge at a high-end baking supply store, the day after she claimed she couldn't pay her electric bill. Everything about this morning was curated, down to the garnishes on the mimosas. After breakfast, we moved to the living room for the family's ritualistic gift exchange. It had always been a choreographed production, with Mom playing conductor, orchestrating the sequence of openings and reactions. This year, she seemed especially invested in directing the performance. "Brenda, why don't you give Clara your gift first?" Mom said, with deliberate cheer. Brenda handed me a small, carelessly wrapped box. Inside was a stained ceramic mug with the words, "World's okayest sister." It wasn't new. The faint coffee ring inside confirmed that. I smiled thinly. "Cute," I said, placing it aside. Marcus followed with a $25 bookstore gift card, generic and impersonal. Mom and Robert presented me with a scarf I recognized from Mom's own wardrobe. It still smelled like her perfume. Then it was my turn. I distributed each gift with quiet precision. For Marcus, a premium leather portfolio embossed with his name, an acknowledgement of his many entrepreneurial ventures. For Brenda, sapphire earrings carefully chosen to match her wedding set. For Mom and Robert, a weekend package to the luxury resort they'd once wistfully mentioned. Their reactions were telling, more discomfort than gratitude. Brenda barely glanced at the earrings before setting them aside. Marcus fidgeted with the portfolio, avoiding eye contact altogether. Well, Mom said, her voice overly bright. That was certainly generous, especially considering. She trailed off, casting a glance at Brenda, who straightened her shoulders as though stepping into a role. Actually, Brenda said, voice composed, rehearsed. We've got something we need to discuss with you, Clara. The room went still. Marcus became fascinated by the carpet pattern. Robert took a long, deliberate sip of his drink. We've been talking, Brenda continued, about the family dynamic, about what's healthy and what's not. Have you now? I replied, steady despite the quickening in my chest. This was it. The moment I'd sensed coming but had never imagined would be delivered so coldly. Yes, and we've made a decision, a family decision. She looked to Mom, who offered a small, affirming nod. A vote, I repeated quietly. Brenda's tone turned razor sharp. We've decided that you're no longer part of this family. The words landed like a slap. So stark, so unapologetic. I needed a moment just to absorb them. What Brenda means, Mom jumped in quickly, painting her expression with maternal pain, is that we believe it's time for some space, some boundaries. This hasn't been healthy for a while. You've been controlling, Marcus added, eyes still fixed on anything but mine, always tying everything to money, making us feel small, like we owe you. We need to heal, Brenda said firmly. So we're asking you to leave, today, and to give us space, real space. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue she had somehow already prepared. It's so hard, sweetheart. But it's for the best. For all of us. Even you. I looked around the room. Brenda, radiating smug satisfaction. Marcus shrinking into the corner. Mom, weeping on cue. Robert, lost in his drink, offering no resistance. And in that moment, everything clicked into place. They hadn't gathered to ask for more money. They had gathered to cast me out. Now that I had stopped being of use. 7 years of sacrifice. 7 years of putting their futures ahead of my own. And now, with nothing left to take, they were discarding me like a worn-out coat. A strange calm settled over me as their words echoed in the air, sharp and final. I had always expected this moment, being cast out, to devastate me, but instead I felt something startlingly different, clarity. And beneath that, a quiet, rising relief. For the first time in years, I was no longer clinging to illusions. Without a word, I reached into my leather messenger bag and pulled out the red folder. The glossy cover caught the warm light of the Thanksgiving centerpiece as I placed it gently beneath its lowest branch. It looked almost like a gift, a fitting final offering. Brenda frowned, her confidence flickering. What's that? I turned to my mother. Her carefully composed expression froze the instant our eyes met. Whatever she saw in my face drained the smile from hers. Open it, I said evenly. I think you'll find it illuminating. No one moved. The folder sat there, bright against the wrapping paper and fallen ribbons, radiating its quiet power. What is this, Clara? Mom finally asked. For the first time that day, her voice cracked. Not with sadness, but with fear. 7 years of receipts, I replied calmly. Every loan, every gift, every so-called emergency, all documented. Marcus shifted in his seat. Brenda's smug mask faltered. Even Robert lowered his drink, his eyes suddenly sharp and focused. This is exactly what I meant, Brenda snapped, her voice already fraying. You're obsessed with money. You treat us like we're your tenants or something, tracking every penny like a spreadsheet is a relationship. Aren't you my debtors? I asked. Pulling the folder toward me, I opened it and lifted the top sheet. A spreadsheet, neatly color-coded. $253,842, I said. That's what I've given this family in the last 7 years, Mom choked on her breath. That's absurd, Marcus muttered, though his complexion had gone gray. Is it? I said, calmly laying down the evidence. Here's a transfer, $20,000 to Clara Jensen, dated March 15th, for a business investment. I set down another page. A business never registered with the state, but the BMW you bought a week later was registered, in your name. Lovely car. Still keeping it at Jason's place? Marcus gaped, lips moving, but no words came. I turned to Brenda. $35,000 for your wedding. $15,000 for medical emergencies, which turned out to be elective cosmetic procedures. I placed down the PI's photos, her vacation property, the deed records, the smiling Instagram shots. This lovely Orcas Island retreat? Bought last June, 3 days after you cried to me about almost losing your house. Brenda turned crimson. You spied on us? That's insane. That's stalking. No, Brenda. That's called due diligence. Something I should have started doing years ago. Then I faced my mother. And the gambling, Mom. That was a surprise. The high-stakes slots at Snoqualmie. The casino ATM withdrawals. Over $40,000 last year alone. Mom's hand flew to her throat. How dare you? I pulled out another sheet. Bank statements, loyalty records, ATM logs. All legal, all verifiable, all obtained by my attorney. Robert blinked. Eleanor, gambling, is that true? His voice held disbelief. My mother didn't answer. Her glare at me was pure venom. I turned to him gently. You didn't know? The money wasn't for groceries or taxes. It was fuel for a losing streak. Ask her about the VIP tier she qualified for. That's a lie, Mom hissed, but her hands trembled in her lap. I took out the final envelope, a letter prepared by my lawyer. This outlines repayment terms. I've been more than fair with interest rates and timeline. My attorney advised I pursue fraud charges in several instances, but for now, I've chosen not to. Lawyer, Marcus croaked. Clara Chen, financial recovery and family law. She finds this case both tragic and extremely compelling. Brenda surged to her feet. You ungrateful bitch. After everything we've done for you, I met her eyes. What exactly have you done for me, Brenda? My voice was low but steady. Tell me, remind me. We're family, Mom cried out, clinging to her most reliable weapon. Yes, I said evenly. You made that clear when you voted me out of it. And then I reached once more into the folder and retrieved a small digital recorder. I clicked it on. Their voices filled the silent room, as unmistakable as they were cruel. She's such an easy mark. Just say family emergency, and she whips out her checkbook. Remember that stupid payment plan? Like I was ever going to pay that back. She's lonely. We're all she has. It's almost sad. The gift that keeps on giving. The audio played out in full. The room had gone deathly still. Marcus stared into the distance. Brenda's jaw clenched so tightly, her temple twitched. Mom's face had crumpled, her eyes darting with panic. I wasn't at dinner that night, I said quietly. But I heard enough. Robert looked around, bewildered and disgusted. Is this true? All of it? His voice was soft. No one answered. I've spent 7 years believing I was helping my family, I said. My voice steady despite the storm gathering inside me. 7 years of canceling plans, delaying dreams, emptying my accounts. Because you needed me. Because I was taught that family comes first. I closed the red folder with care, like sealing a casket. But I see now. I wasn't helping. I was enabling. And you weren't family. You were users. You can't prove any of this, Brenda snapped, though her voice cracked like a hairline fracture under pressure. Everything in this folder has been reviewed by my legal team, I replied. Loan agreements Marcus signed, messages promising repayment, patterns of exploitation, all legally admissible. Marcus stood abruptly. Clara, this is a misunderstanding. We appreciate you. We love you, okay? You know that. Do I asked. Because half an hour ago, you all voted me out of the family. That was Brenda's idea, he blurted, earning a venomous glare from his sister. It doesn't matter whose idea it was. You all agreed. And honestly, it was the most honest moment I've had with this family in years. Mom, regaining composure, reached for her most reliable script. Sweetheart, we can fix this. We're family. Families fight. They say things they don't mean. But blood is thicker than... That's not even the quote, I interrupted. The full saying is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It means the opposite of how you've always used it. Chosen bonds are stronger than inherited ones. I stood calmly placing the documents back into the red folder. You have 2 options. Option 1. You sign the repayment agreements, commit to family therapy, and take responsibility. We build healthy boundaries moving forward. I slid the folder into my bag. Option 2. I pursue legal action against each of you. Recovery of funds. Documentation of fraud. No more warnings. You'd sue your own family? Mom gasped. I believe Brenda said I don't have a family anymore. I lifted my bag to my shoulder. You have until New Year's. My lawyer will follow up with paperwork. Brenda sprang to her feet, eyes blazing. You self-righteous, calculating bitch. You think you're better than us? At least we know how to live. You have nothing. No husband, no kids, no life. You're wrong, I said, my voice even. I know a great deal about love, sacrifice, loyalty. I've spent 7 years proving that. What I've learned is, those things have to be mutual to matter. I paused at the door. One last thing. The gifts I gave you today? No strings attached. They're paid for. Consider them a farewell gesture and a reminder of what real generosity looks like. As I stepped outside, the door closed behind me with a soft final click. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I walked to my car. I didn't make it far before I heard it swing open again. You can't just drop a bomb and leave, Brenda shouted, breath fogging in the cold air. I turned, steady. That wasn't a bomb, Brenda. That was evidence. There's a difference. One by one, the others filed out. Marcus, then Mom, and finally Robert, looking lost and pale. They huddled on the porch, united once more against a threat they didn't understand. Because this time, the threat wasn't financial, it was truth. Let's calm down, Marcus said, slipping into the peacemaker role he wore when convenient. Come back inside, Clara. It's cold out here. I'm not interested in another discussion where you guilt me into submission, I said. The folder says everything that needs to be said. This is all about money, Mom wailed. You've made it about money, always keeping score, tracking every cent. It's not about the money, I interrupted. It's about respect, gratitude, honesty, things I haven't received in years. So you're willing to tear this family apart over misunderstandings? Brenda demanded. No, I said softly. You tore this family apart each time you lied, manipulated, and took advantage of my kindness. And when you finally told the truth, when you said I wasn't part of this family, that's when I realized it had already happened. Mom stepped forward, voice trembling. We were emotional. You know Brenda, she gets carried away. Don't blame me, Brenda fired back. You agreed. You always manipulate everyone and play the victim. As they turned on each other, Robert approached, eyes downcast. Clara, I didn't know about the gambling or the money. Eleanor said it was occasional, just emergencies. You never questioned it, I asked. The upgrades, the getaways, the wine tastings, on a teacher's part-time salary and your intermittent hours. I didn't want to know, he admitted. It was easier to look away. Willful ignorance is still a choice, Robert. Marcus approached, shoulders hunched. Look, about the BMW. I don't care about the car, I said. I care that you lied. That you never intended to build a business or repay me. I was going to, eventually. Things just got complicated. No, things got comfortable, I corrected. It was easier to take than to earn. That's not fair, he began. When was the last time you held a job more than 3 months, followed through on anything? This isn't about being perfect. It's about being accountable. From behind us, Brenda's voice rose again. She can't sue us. She won't. According to my lawyer, I have a solid case, I called back, especially with recorded proof of intent and patterns of deceit. That's when Mom broke down, her control finally slipping. I have a problem, she whispered, tears streaming. After your dad, I felt like nothing. Gambling gave me a feeling, like I still existed. Mom, Brenda began, but Mom shook her off. No, it's time. I've lied. To all of you. Clara's money, it mostly went to the casinos. I kept thinking I'd win, make it right, fix it, but I never did. She looked at me, and for the first time in years, her expression held something real, remorse. I never meant for it to go this far. And yet you let it, I said gently. You all did. I was ashamed, she said. And then it became easier to keep pretending. Brenda's voice was barely a whisper. The second mortgage, it wasn't for repairs, was it? Mom shook her head. Silent, exposed. The wind rustled the garlands on the porch. A child laughed somewhere down the street. The illusion of the perfect Thanksgiving shattered at last. And in the quiet aftermath, I turned and walked to my car. Free. What happens now? Marcus finally asked, his voice small, uncertain. Like I said, I repeated calmly. You have options. I reached into my bag and withdrew 5 sealed envelopes, each marked with a name in my careful handwriting. These letters outline my terms. Inside, you'll find repayment schedules, requirements for therapy, both individual and family, and the conditions for continuing any kind of relationship with me. These are not suggestions. They are non-negotiable. Brenda took hers and turned it over, inspecting the seal. And if we agree to the terms? Then we try, I said. We try to rebuild something better, something rooted in honesty, accountability, and mutual respect. Not obligation, not guilt, not control. Marcus frowned slightly. And if we can't pay it all back? The schedules are based on what each of you earns. They're realistic. There are also provisions for alternative restitution, community service, therapy hours. This was never about getting every dollar back, I said. It's about facing what's been done and committing to change. Mom finally spoke again, her voice almost inaudible. And the therapy part? That's mandatory? It's the most important part, I replied gently. Money comes and goes. But trust? That takes real work to restore. They stood there, clutching the envelopes as if they might bite. The morning light caught their features in new ways, exposed, vulnerable. Suddenly, they no longer looked like the giants of my past. They looked like people, flawed, frightened, and at long last without control. I never wanted things to end this way, I said softly. I wanted to be part of a family that lifted each other up, that didn't just take but gave, a family that loved without conditions and respected without being reminded. We do love you, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Love without respect isn't love, I answered. It's just another way to use someone. I turned to go, then paused. 3 months, no contact during that time. Use it to reflect, begin the work, start healing, without expecting anything from me. After that, we'll reassess, not based on promises, but on actions. And then I left. As I drove down the familiar street, the image of them, still standing on the porch, letters in hand, faded into my rearview mirror. They didn't chase me this time. No more arguments, no more manipulation, just silence. It should have hurt more than it did. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. A strange, beautiful quiet settled inside me, equal parts grief and peace. And just beneath the surface, something more surprising still, freedom. Halfway home, I realized what it was. For the first time in 7 years, I was free. Free from the burden of being everyone's lifeline. Free from the twisted loyalty that kept me tethered to people who only saw my value in what I could provide. Free to choose myself, my future. The red folder had done its work, and that, I realized, was the greatest Thanksgiving gift I could have ever given, to myself. 6 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, I found myself back in Dr. Evelyn Reed's softly lit office. The walls still painted a muted sage, and the scent of herbal tea lingering from a previous client. Outside her window, the cherry blossoms that once fluttered like confetti were long gone, replaced by the dense stillness of Seattle's humid summer. The season had changed. So had I. "How are you feeling about the family meeting tomorrow?" she asked. Her pen poised, though I knew she rarely wrote much unless she sensed a shift. Nervous, I admitted, glancing at my hands, which were fidgeting with the edge of my sleeve. It's been 3 months since our last structured conversation. A lot has changed since then. Not all of it expected. "Let's revisit your boundaries," she said gently. "Especially what's non-negotiable." The aftermath of Thanksgiving hadn't been clean or cathartic. It had been messy, layered, and human. At first there was rage, voicemails full of betrayal, demands that I retract those ridiculous claims. Then came the bargaining. Brenda offered to repay in small installments if I dropped the legal threat. Marcus sent late-night texts asking if therapy really had to be part of the deal. But once my lawyer responded with formal intent, reality began to settle in like unwelcome snow. Oddly, it was Mom who pivoted first. 3 weeks after that morning, she checked herself into a gambling addiction program. The initial intake revealed what she hadn't even admitted to herself. Over $200,000 lost over 5 years, multiple hidden credit cards, and 2 secret loans taken against the house. Robert gave her an ultimatum, I told Dr. Reed. Get help or he'd leave. That apparently was her rock bottom. "And how is she now?" Dr. Reed asked, her tone clinical but kind. "She's 6 months clean. She goes to GA twice a week, and she's working with a financial counselor. She's teaching full-time again. Says she wants to repay the damage, not just the debt. I paused. She's not the same. She's tired, but honest. That's new. The legal and financial resolution had taken months of negotiation. Under my lawyer's guidance, formal repayment agreements were established and notarized. Mom and Robert sold their timeshare and the second car. Marcus sold the BMW. Brenda and Eric, after much protest, listed their primary residence. "And your brother?" Dr. Reed asked. "You mentioned some encouraging progress." I allowed myself a quiet smile. He completed vocational training. He's been working as an IT support specialist for 3 months now, which is the longest he's held a job since college. He said structure feels good for once, that he finally feels proud of himself. And oddly, I believe him, she nodded. That's a huge shift. For both of you. Not everything had softened. Brenda met the financial requirements, yes. But the therapy? She sat through it like someone serving a sentence. Cold, unengaged. Always with a clock in her eye. Her bitterness hadn't faded, only changed shape. And how's that relationship now? I sighed. Still strained. She sees me as the one who broke the family, not the one who exposed it. Dr. Reed's eyes were knowing. That's common. The one who breaks the pattern often bears the blame for all the pain that comes with truth. I'm learning to let go of the version of Brenda I wanted her to be. I'm not sure she ever existed. Beyond the slow, difficult reconstruction of my family, something else had bloomed, my life. Untethered from the weight of 4 other adults' finances, I'd bought my own condo in Queen Anne, a sunny 2-bedroom with hardwood floors and a balcony just big enough for a small container garden. Tomatoes, herbs, lavender in an old ceramic pot. I joined a book club and a local hiking group. I started saying yes to things that weren't about fixing anyone, just enjoying them. I made friends. I felt lighter. And then there was Julian, a thoughtful, soft-spoken architect I met at a fundraiser for a financial literacy nonprofit, where I'd started volunteering. He listened the way most people talked, slowly, with intention. With him, I didn't feel like a burden or a ledger. I felt like a person. You've created quite a life for yourself these past 6 months, Dr. Reed observed, her voice warm, almost proud. It feels like my life, I said. For the first time, it actually feels like mine. Our sessions had helped me peel back layers I didn't even know I was carrying. The family therapy, led by Dr. Carter, had been challenging, grueling at times, but necessary. In that neutral room, we mapped the generational dysfunction like a living blueprint. The roles we'd all been assigned, the silence we mistook for peace, the way need was bartered as love. I never realized how much of my identity had been shaped by Dad's abandonment, I admitted. I tried to patch the hole he left by becoming indispensable to everyone else. I gave money because I didn't know how else to say, please don't leave me too. And they took it because they didn't know how to ask for anything else. Dr. Reed nodded. Systems evolve to serve a purpose, even if, over time, that purpose becomes harmful. But you've disrupted the system. That takes courage. The legal aspects had resolved more easily than I'd expected. Once they saw I wasn't bluffing, my family complied with the structured repayment plans. The monthly payments came in, sometimes with curt notes, sometimes with silence, but they came. The total would never match what I had sacrificed over the years, and that was okay. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about what the payments represented. Accountability, recognition, respect. Tomorrow's dinner will be different, I said thoughtfully. It's our first gathering without lawyers, without therapists. Just us. Just family. And you've put firm boundaries in place for the evening, she asked, folding her hands with that subtle therapist tilt of her head. Yes. Neutral location, downtown restaurant, 2-hour time cap. No discussion of money beyond the agreements. Everyone pays for their own meal. No favors. No assumptions. Dr. Reed nodded again. And your internal boundaries? I paused, then spoke with more clarity than I'd expected. I'll name the behavior if old patterns return. If it doesn't stop, I'll excuse myself. I won't stay to be reabsorbed. I've learned that their choices are theirs to carry. I'm not the fixer anymore. I'm not responsible for their comfort or their feelings. Excellent, she said. Clara, you've come so far. And I had. In the past 6 months, I had reshaped not just my relationship with them, but with myself. I no longer confused guilt with love. I recognized manipulation even when it came dressed as need. I knew that true generosity only mattered when it was freely given, not extracted. And I had started building something new, an ecosystem of care that included people who didn't need saving, just showing up. That evening, I met my friend Tara at our usual cafe, tucked on a quiet corner near the waterfront. We'd met through the financial abuse support group back in January, both navigating the blurry lines between family loyalty and self-preservation. Over time, she had become more than a support group contact. She had become my friend, my people. We swapped stories over oat milk lattes, not of trauma, but of progress, of how her sister had reached out after months of silence, of how I'd started volunteering with the financial literacy nonprofit and was now being considered for a board seat, of how healing doesn't happen in a straight line, but how sometimes just holding the map in your own hands makes all the difference. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Tara asked, sliding into the corner booth of our favorite cafe, her hands wrapped around a warm mug. Terrified, I confessed, trying to keep my smile from slipping. What if it all falls apart again? What if they haven't really changed? She met my gaze, steady and unflinching. "Then you'll handle it," she said simply. "The difference is, now you know you can walk away. You're not trapped anymore." Her words followed me home like a soft echo. That night, as I got ready for bed, I opened the red folder one last time. Not to tally pain, but to hold space for healing. The documents were gone. In their place, pages from my journal, reflections from therapy, affirmations I'd written for hard days, and snapshots of my new life. Me on a hiking trail, smiling beside Julian, laughing with friends around a bonfire. My life, reassembled piece by piece. I ran my fingers along the folder's worn edges, remembering the weight it had carried 6 months ago as I placed it beneath the Thanksgiving centerpiece like a reckoning. It had once been a record of all I had endured, proof of how deeply I had been used. But now it had become something else entirely. Not an archive, but an altar. Not a burden, but a bridge. This Thanksgiving would look nothing like the ones that came before it. There would be no illusion of harmony held together by silence and sacrifice. Whether tomorrow's dinner led to deeper reconciliation or clarified that some distances are meant to remain, I knew one thing for sure. I would meet the day on my terms. Perhaps I'd end the evening with Julian, curled up on my balcony with a glass of wine and quiet conversation. Perhaps I'd host a small gathering of the friends who had become my chosen family. People who loved me without strings. Perhaps I'd find unexpected connection with my mother or my brother. Or perhaps not. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in my adult life, that uncertainty didn't feel like danger. It felt like freedom. I had learned that standing up for myself was not selfish. It was sacred. That boundaries were not punishments, but maps of where I ended and others began. That love, when divorced from respect, was not love at all, but dependency in disguise. Most of all, I had learned that truth, once spoken, could not be unspoken, but it could set you free. The red folder had once marked the beginning of an unraveling. Now it marked the beginning of becoming. The real story was never about what I exposed. It was about what I built afterward. A life based not on obligation, but authenticity. Not on performance, but presence. As I sank into bed and let the stillness of night settle around me, I felt it. Not sadness, not fear, gratitude. Not for what I had lost, but for everything I had found. Myself, my voice, my boundaries, my worth. The red folder had changed everything, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of your generosity? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's a vital act of self-respect. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about strength, healing, and personal growth. And if you know someone who needs to hear that it's okay to put themselves first, share this with them. Thank you for listening to my journey. And always remember, your worth isn't measured by what you give to others, but by how you choose to honor yourself.